Now let's dig into section 1, where we focus on identifying shapes. There's a lot of language that's important for identifying shapes. I need to get out of here so you can see some of this language. So as we think about two-dimensional shapes, these are those flat shapes that typically cannot be picked up and handled, although you can, sort of some of the manipulatives that we would describe as flat shapes, you can pick those up. But some common vocabulary that is important for students includes the following: circle, triangle, square, rectangle, quadrilateral, pentagon, hexagon. There are other terms that may be important for you and your students, such as rhombus and trapezoid and kite and so on, but these are some of the essential names for different shapes. And then as we talk about two-dimensional shapes, we want to talk about the angles that are created when we put line segments together. We are often talking about closed shapes, but we might also be talking about open shapes. We will often describe the sides of a shape. And then when we have the point where two line segments meet that forms an angle, that is called a vertex. Now with figures, we have our three-dimensional, it says shapes here. I often call these three-dimensional figures. These are shapes that can be picked up and handled because they're three-dimensional. And often students need to know the language related to a cone, cube, cylinder, sphere, and you may also eventually get students to be talking about prisms and pyramids. Some of the language that's important for three-dimensional figures includes angles that are created, edges, faces, and vertices. Now there's a lot of vocabulary related to two-dimensional shapes and three-dimensional figures. And so in the Kansas Math Project, we have put together these vocabulary cards. Here are just two of the many vocabulary cards you can download along with this module. The idea with these vocabulary cards is that you might want to print these out and use them as a word wall in your classroom so that students are surrounded by this vital vocabulary at all times. Now that brings us to a pause where I would like you to think a little bit about some of the vocabulary that we just saw, and then some other vocabulary that you know is important for understanding shapes and figures. So which of these terms are relevant for your specific grade level, and how might you explicitly teach these terms and support students in the development of this precise mathematical language?